Okay, so it's Tuesday, September 17th. It's about 9 a.m. Eastern. So welcome, Ajahn Santamano. This
Very
is
good.
our this is our first conversation for our decolonial dharma YouTube channel and bad Buddhist publication. So thank you for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I feel it's the work you are doing is so important, especially in the context of the ongoing genocide in Palestine and the silence of the mainstream Buddhist community in terms of our teachers and so-called teachers and even monastics about this issue.
Yeah, you're one of the I would call you a renegade, one of the sole unique voices in among monastics that I know of anyway, who has spoken out so clearly for Palestinian liberation. I'm wondering if maybe you could describe why you speak out and why it is most of your peers are not speaking out against genocide.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose when we say in Buddhism having compassion for all sentient beings, and then when the sort of genocide of the scale that is currently happening in Palestine as we speak is happening, and then Buddhist people who claim to be Buddhist practitioners don't speak out, I find that very disturbing. Um, And I first became aware of Palestine around 2014 when I read the book by Ilan Pappe, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Uh, and before that, my views were just very ignorant mainstream views that, oh, it's a religious conflict, it has been going on for thousands of years, etc., etc. And then reading that book, I realized the scale and nature of the injustice in terms of its relation to European and North American colonization, um, and the nature of the ongoing injustice of the one group of people attempting to take all the land and resources of a particular place and not wanting the people, the indigenous people who are there to be there. And the so logic, I think Patrick Wolfe said something like settler colonialism is a structure, not an event.
Mhm.
And the logic is always the elimination of the native. And that unfortunately we see at the moment live streamed before our eyes for more than 11 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course, some folks might not know Ilan Pappe is an Israeli writer and scholar, and um, is fiercely all about Palestine, the liberation of Palestine. But I'm wondering also, I mean, as you talk about colonial conquest, and if you could maybe share with us a little bit about your own background, your own heritage. You also grew up in the UK, which is sort of the heart of the empire. Uh, uh, but it must all be part of the the narrative, right? Of why you speak for Palestine and other causes.
Oh yes, in a sense, my coming to understand the nature of ongoing colonization. So came gradually. I was born in the UK, but then when I was 6, we went back to India, and then we came back to the UK when I was 13. And so, being in the sort of UK education system, or I would say miseducation system, that my sort of uncritical view was that, oh, colonialism, racism, etc. It's all things in the past, and now it's a multicultural society, etc., etc., which has pushed all these things behind. But then, of course, I think probably after the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, gradually I started to learn more about um, the nature of how countries like the UK, the United States act in the world, and then learning more about history of slavery, history of indigenous genocide, North South America, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And just coming to the realization that when saying we live in a post-colonial uh, society, post-colonial world, it's being a bit optimistic. It's just the nature of colonialism has changed. It's maybe not direct colonization, but the resource extraction. Books like Walter Rodney's "How Europe Underdeveloped Africa" or Eduardo Galeano's "Open Veins of Latin America", so demonstrating how the nature of resource extraction, labor extraction, exploitation for, by the global north of the global south still continue to function. So yeah, gradually becoming more aware of how these systems and structures operate, and then living in a country like the UK, which still has not at all addressed its past of colonization, and gradually becoming more and more aware of how these systems of white supremacy, etc., operate
Mhm.
within ordinary life in the UK. So then,
Yeah.
yeah, feeling the need to both for myself to learn more about these systems and structures, and also to speak more in from a spiritual point of view, bringing these things into spiritual practice.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I've appreciated about you over the last few months of solidarity and getting to know one another through this genocide is how much you're a student. You're a student of history, a student of politics, and not only do you study and read, but you put these values into practice, which is I don't know too many Buddhist teachers in the United States where I live who are currently engaged in that kind of um, learning about global history. And so when when activists and scholars of Black liberation make the connection to Palestinian liberation. I mean, you mentioned Eduardo Galeano, but it's there really is a history of of freeing our peoples from the shackles of colonialism and slavery that it's so obvious to people who come from the global South, but somehow in the United States, there's either amnesia or we just are so poorly educated among those who are allegedly educated about basic things like genocide and slavery. And I wonder if you've noticed, in your travels and in your conversations with American Buddhists, American monastics, if you've seen that kind of that lack of understanding, and if you can even explain it.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of in Western Buddhism, or I suppose white Buddhism, maybe. Uh, yeah, there's, I suppose, also in maybe traditionally Buddhist societies, but at least from what I know of Western Buddhism, there seems to be a lot of spiritual bypassing, i.e., using Buddhist teachings in order as an excuse to not engage with these issues, or issues of social justice, on the nature of how injustice operates in society. So then it becomes sort of individualized of just looking at arising of suffering, and then just for the individual, and then not really looking at the circumstances which bring about the bring about the uh, suffering or exploitation, oppression of particular groups of people, and not really addressing those external conditions which contribute to the suffering of large groups of people, and then the exclusions that can function in mainstream practice spaces of by not addressing the the factors or systems and structures of oppression that operate in ordinary society, then the sort of white middle class nature of what seems to be Western Buddhism is it's a very limiting framework. Whereas, of course, in Buddhist teachings, looking inwards, looking at how much we create our own suffering, those aspects are central to Buddhist practice. Yet, if we ignore the external aspects, at least I've observed, it means large sections of society are excluded or do not feel that these teachings address things that affect their lives, and then yeah.
Yeah, it feels like you're describing a little bit of the Western cult of individuality and extraction. What can I get from these traditions that can best serve me and myself and I see that kind of in the meditation halls in the West. Certainly this focus on achieving some kind of enlightenment on the cushion without taking into account anything around us, our communities, who's suffering around us. It's quite appalling, and a real dissonance, a cognitive dissonance there for folks who have grown up with or who are bent toward social justice.
And that's such a capitalist framing of the mechanisms of isolating and atomizing the individual, so that there's that slogan that's often chanted, the people united will never be defeated. And if one looks at how society functions, or capitalist society functions, as always that tendency to make sure that the people do not get united, and that separation and divide and conquer.
Ajahn, can we pause for just a second? I'm sorry, the microphone is a little wacky. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just a second. Hello. Yes. Can you try speaking again? Okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Do you want to try connecting and disconnecting just your... You were perfect up until about 30 seconds ago.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Still a little bit gritty.
Audio. So I left the
Perfect.
audio. Okay, so it's good. So where shall I, from the capitalist?
Why don't we just dive into to our conversation about a recent dialogue between two very popular American teachers, Joan Halifax and Tara Brach last week. Tara has found herself, I think, in the midst of quite a quite a volcano. I don't know what else to call it around Palestine and Israel since the genocide began in Gaza. And it seems she seems to be digging her grave deeper and deeper every time she speaks about Palestine. I actually went back to the piece she originally wrote some months ago about Gaza and Israel, and I was struck by, you know, I'm a writer and I love doing the kind of fine print reading, you know. I was struck by the fact that she never used the word Palestine in her essay. So she referred to what we know as Palestine in these little kind of colonial chunks, right? These Bantustans, as we know them, that, you know, I'm using the term developed in South Africa to describe the system of apartheid there, but the West Bank and Gaza, as if that is all that, you know, the so-called other side has. So there's quite a lot of reference to Jewishness and Israeliness, but nothing really about Palestine. And this is her best attempt to bring some sort of compassion to the conversation. And I've thought so much about this and laughed so much about this, but I'm just curious what you think, you know, and the fact that we've spent so much time having to sort of listen to these conversations, absorb or ignore them, and the effort, the emotional labor it requires for those of us, you know, who are attempting to practice the dharma and in a way that honors the liberation of all peoples. What do you want to share about Tara's messaging? Why is it even important that we talk about it?
Yeah, so it's extremely unfortunate the
Oh,
level.
Ajahn, the click is happening again. Did something change?
Oh no. So how should I try headphones?
Yeah, try headphones.
Is that any better?
No.
No.
There's some adjustment you made that completely fixed it, and then it kind of went back.
Yeah. Yeah, I disconnected the audio and then
Do you want to try that again?
is that
Yep,
better?
that fixed it again.
Yeah, not sure how long it will last.
Okay, let's give it a go.
So yeah, it's highly unfortunate just the level of ignorance demonstrated in you know, I mean, I would take Tara Brach as just a symptomatic case. I mean, one of the just appalling things in especially in this talk, she refers to, I think, twice at the start to the Israel-Pakistan conflict. So it's like not even after 11 months of genocide, not even being able to name name Palestine. So, and then the again this idea of spiritual bypassing, of using Buddhist teachings in order to try and appear to be compassionate, and then taking a certain neutral position of looking at both sides narrative, and not looking at the sort of scale of the power differential. I think referring to that original article a few months ago, I think Mona Chopra, yoga teacher, meditation teacher, did a very good response on her Instagram, just pointing these things.
And of course, it's important to note that, Tara's piece was published, right, by
Yeah,
these sort of mainstream, the the powers that be, the white powers that be, that decide what's going to get published around the topics of Buddhism. But Mona's response or rebuttal was not, right.
yeah,
Mona, who is actually of South Asian descent, is erased from the conversation, while Tara, who is, even the fact that I call her Tara, right, like, I don't even, it's quite a lot to digest for me as someone of South Asian descent. I was introduced to Tara Brach's books and podcasts, and by sort of the white and sometimes Jewish white teachers that were my original teachers, and I was sort of repulsed by this kind of adoption of Indian culture in her talks. Very appropriative, not sure what it was doing there. She regularly starts her talks with a namaste, and I thought, oh my God, what is happening to me right now? You know, I think it's entirely relevant. She takes these sort of pieces of Indian cultural tradition or heritage and makes it her own. Even if her son is named Narayan, for example. I mean, that's a big deal, right? Like, but she doesn't seem to understand that calling Palestine Pakistan is a huge problem. And this is not sort of like something you say while you're drunk, right? It's just, she very consciously said it after months and months of Palestinians being slaughtered. Yeah, I even find your kind of analysis a little generous, that she has a two sides approach. I mean, I would call it sort of a one side approach, and at that, not a very good one. I mean, there's nothing there even about the history of Israel to say, to say nothing of the history of Palestine, right? But it's
yeah,
such a sort of, I woke up one day and October 7th happened, and the region didn't even exist before October 7th.
yeah,
It's a very kind of shallow description of a problem which has such historical richness, and there's just no understanding of sort of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine and the ethnic cleansing that happens in her meditation halls. How freely she uses Indian references while participating in the ban of political symbols in her halls. I mean, it's not irony. It's kind of depravity. I don't even know. And for some folks, I have the sort of honor of having South Asian heritage, and so I feel quite justified in saying this. But what have they done to our traditions? What have they done? The Buddha was this radical activist, as was Jesus, right? Radical activist, anti-caste, caste abolitionist. And yet white Buddhists, American Buddhists at large, but particularly, the white teachers that have informed American Buddhism, have completely erased South Asian history. They've erased the Buddha's history, right? So he's just this sort of amorphous statue in the hall with no ethnicity, with no language, with no history, with no context of, you know, caste and power and poverty, all of the things that he railed against and rallied against, blows my mind. And then we have folks like Tara Brach saying namaste.
Yeah,
I mean, the
yeah,
gall, right? The gall of it. I wouldn't even say namaste in a hall, in a white Western hall.
yeah, yeah,
So, and apparently this, right? This expression, I'm really just venting to you, sharing with you. This expression is not considered appropriate. This expression of sort of, you know, our colonial histories, and I'm not just speaking about South Asia, of course, I'm speaking about the entire global South. Our colonial histories, the legacy of enslavement, the legacy of colonialism has no bearing on our existence as human beings today. Blows my mind that it's a thing of the past, a thing of the past. And you know, Buddhist teachers like Tara Brach, like Joan Halifax, like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg, you know, these are very beloved teachers in the United States, very beloved. I have learned from them. And I have also learned that I have to know when to take a step back, or to take a step forward, really, not back, but to take a step forward away from their teachings.
yeah,
When they were forced, really, I can't even say encouraged, they were forced by a tidal wave of Black liberation activism when George Floyd was murdered in 2020 to confront the racism within their institutions, the anti-Black racism, just so deep, and is still so deep in these American Buddhist institutions. But it was Black activists who did the emotional labor, training Tara and Jack and so on and so forth. And to what end, I don't know, because not much has changed.
yeah.
And now we have a ban on political symbols at Insight Meditation Society and Spirit Rock, which includes Black Lives Matter flags. You know, not only Palestinian flags, not only kafiyehs, right? So what have they learned? You know, these I'm looking at your robes, right? Like they might as well ban your robe.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, they might as well ban my shirt, which is Indian.
yeah,
You know, like I've got a picture of my mother here. I always have a picture of my mom. They might as well ban her sari. Like,
yeah.
you know, where do they have no shame.
Yeah, and like bell hooks, I think often in her talk, she will start off with listing out all the various systems of oppression that operate in our society. Like we live in a white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist, heteropatriarchal world. And then when there is a sort of complete unwillingness to look at how these systems operate, and then taking a sort of mystical oriental tradition and then using that to appear to be spiritual and compassionate.
That's right.
It's very yeah, very jarring, and I certainly feel that as so many resources within Buddhism that are so relevant to these questions, but then if these questions themselves are not even acknowledged, then how can one bring Buddhist teachings, or bring what Buddhist teachings might have to say to these questions into examining what Buddhist teachings might have to offer.
Yeah. Yeah. I was struck. I also didn't make it past, maybe a minute past the first Pakistan commentary. I really tried, but when she said we were gonna engage in practice on everything she had spoken about, I said, no way, not for me. No, thank you. I'm gonna save myself. But her thesis seemed to be in this conversation with Joan Halifax last week that what she calls divides, divisions, right? Polarization leads to suffering. And I thought that's a fascinating theory.
Yeah.
But doesn't suffering lead to division? Isn't it the opposite? Like, isn't it the greed and the theft and the enslavement and the colonization that I'm going to take whatever I want? I'm going to violate your body, your space, your history, your language, your heritage. Doesn't that lead to suffering? Right?
Yeah.
Suffering doesn't happen in a vacuum. My God.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, so pathologizing the individual for someone being subjected to oppression, and then whatever resistance is manifested to that oppression, then that becomes pathologized. So then it becomes about, oh, people misunderstanding each other. It's a division. It's a polarization. It's etc. etc. which become blamed, and then that becomes the focus. So how can we have dialogue, have understand each other, as if those being oppressed do not understand the oppressor. So not looking at those structures of oppression, but rather trying to soothe the conscience of the oppressor, and then putting all the burden of reconciliation, forgiveness, etc., etc., on the oppressed.
Yeah.
As keeping and not at all addressing the differential power structures. So they stay in the oppressive power structures stay in place, and then the group being oppressed is expected to do spiritual practice to overcome their suffering.
That's right. Right. I'm reminded of have you seen this video of Stokely Carmichael speaking to there's a white man and a East Asian woman about this idea, why can't we to talk about peace, right? It's a very, very kind of impromptu conversation. And he explains that one requires justice before there can be peace.
Yeah.
The sort of the infamous slogan, no justice, no peace. But it is rooted in reality.
Yeah.
That
The peace.
Until one faces the injustice, one cannot have peace.
Yeah.
Tara.
Yeah, peace. Exactly. Yeah, peace is always on the terms of the colonizer.
That's right. 100%. Yes. I imagine, if we could kind of create a curriculum for white Western Buddhist teachers, I imagine you'd put bell hooks on the list. I would put Ambedkar on the list, sort of black liberation theology, Eduardo Galeano, right? Like it would just be an extraordinary review of global history and the global realities of the present. Exploitation, colonization, theft of minerals and resources across the African continent. It's all so present.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like that whole internationalist tradition of anti-imperialism across Africa, Asia, etc. Indigenous scholars and activists, people who have studied the history of slavery, history of ending of slavery, people, the black radical tradition, etc., etc. So many resources that people, and many of them are freely available. There's so many
that's right.
resources available now.
So it seems that Buddhism in the West is inextricably, if properly practiced, if practiced in its truest intention, would be inextricably linked to liberation movements across the global South, including obviously the liberation of Palestine, and all indigenous peoples,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and of course, I mean, with Palestine, it's just unbelievable the level of obscenity that has been happening these last 11 months. I mean, maybe you probably saw that film a few years ago about the Cantula massacre, where during the Nakba in 1948, one of the villages that was destroyed, and the crimes that were committed there only came to light maybe 20 to 30 years after the event, when the people who perpetrated them started confessing what they did. But now I mean, it has been, they not only commit these atrocities, but I mean, film it themselves and live stream on their social media. So there's not even the level of colonial indoctrination that has occurred in these last since the creation of the state of Israel is just staggering, and the enabling of this genocide by countries like United States, UK, European countries also just there's like the no not any pretense anymore. The mask seems to have fallen off. Yeah. But I mean, hopefully, it means that more people awaken to the nature of yeah, the nature of the world we live in, and that, like that slogan, "The people united will never be defeated." So hopefully, more and more people see the shared nature of all these struggles, also domestically with cutting of social spending, cost of living crisis, homelessness, cutting health services, etc., etc. And yet they have money for all these weapons. And also, of course, related on ongoing genocides like in Sudan or Congo, Kashmir, Haiti, etc. Um, and how these are so interlinked. Someone pointed out something so obvious which I hadn't even registered before they pointed it out, that whenever there tends to be intensification of conflict elsewhere, there also tends to be intensification of conflict in the Congo, because uh, they need especially the resources like the coltan, cobalt, etc. for to make the weapons. So
That's right.
how much these things are interrelated, and there's also anti-blackness in terms of how these these issues are covered, the
That's right.
Islam, etc. etc.
Yeah, such a critical linking of these genocides.
Yeah.
Uh, and I like to deliberately use the term enslavement when I think about the human beings mining for the minerals that create our technology. It's atrocious, our participation in this system, very much linked with the colonization and the settling of Palestine. Ajahn, I wanted to ask you to do that audio thing one more time, and then I'm going to ask you one closing question.
Okay.
You back?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
I was wondering if you would leave our community with a few thoughts on why protest is part and parcel with Buddhism, with the practice of the Dharma. Why is protest not contrary to the values of the Dharma?
So, I mean, I would say uh, maybe, I mean, even a small injustice, one should object and do everything in one's capacity to try and change the circumstances of that injustice. But then when injustice is happening on a scale, it is happening now, the level of the genocide with all hospitals, all universities, journalists, medics, children, it's just a scale of what is happening. To not protest, it's difficult for me to understand how that is. The level of indifference among many people is very shocking to me. So then any spiritual, anyone who claims to be a spiritual practitioner, let alone a Buddhist spiritual practitioner, who does not protest against this, it's difficult to understand, and yet that's not that doesn't seem to be a view shared by many Buddhist practitioners. So I feel it's quite shameful, and the silence of mainstream Buddhist institutions again has been very shameful. So again, it's that thing of what does it mean to have compassion for all sentient beings, and if one is not able to bring these questions into one's spiritual practice, then what is a spiritual practice worth? One thing I've been reflecting on the last 11 months quite often is Gramsci's phrase of pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. So pessimism of the intellect in the sense of seeing clearly just the scale of the forces we are up against, and yet somehow maintaining an optimism of the will, just a willingness to continue to do whatever we can. And it's not sure if whatever we do, going to protest or accept whatever we may be doing, or direct action. If that has any objective effect on the situation, and yet just as a human being, I feel it is so necessary to continue to do whatever we can. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn Santamano. That's a beautiful place to end. Um, I have two goodbyes for you. One, of course, is the clenched fist, which is apparently not appropriate for white Western Dharma. I'm joking. It's quite appropriate now. And also, namaste. Thank you for all of your contributions. There you go.
Thank
And
you.
we'll make sure to you cited quite a bit of literature. We'll try and link those pieces and authors to this video. Thanks so much, and we will hopefully have another conversation soon.
Yeah, thank you for all your work, and see you soon.
Thank you. See you on the streets of London.
Yeah.
Take care.